Today's lesson is on coordinate geometry. So it is trying to take geometry and put it to an XY axis. And today we're going to talk about the midpoint. So here's a picture. We know what a midpoint is. It's the point on a segment, point on a segment that is the same distance from each endpoint. So here is a picture that kind of describes that. Okay, here's an example that they give you. They say the map shows Ziba and Samir's houses on a coordinate grid that has units of miles. If they decide to meet halfway on the segment that connects their homes, what are the coordinates of their meeting place? So here's Samir, here's Ziba, here's the distance between them, and they want to meet halfway. So the question is, right here, what are the coordinates, the x and the y, that would describe the halfway point, the midpoint between Samir's house and Ziba's house? Well, one thing we could do is you could take out a ruler and measure that and find the halfway point that way, but then to determine what the x and the y coordinates are sometimes is kind of difficult to do that, especially when the numbers are difficult. So this is the formula that we're going to use to do this. This is the midpoint formula. If a segment has endpoints, x sub 1, y sub 1, and x sub 2, y sub 2, then the midpoint of the segment is taking the x's of each of those points, adding them up and dividing by 2, and then we're going to take the y's of each of those endpoints, add those up, and divide by 2. So that is what our plan is. So here's Samir and Ziba, and they want to find that midpoint between their homes. So first thing I did is, here's Samir's house. To get to Samir's house from the origin, you have to go to the left 10, so that's a negative 10, and down 5, that's a negative 5. To get to Ziba's house from the origin, you'd have to go to the right 5, so that's a positive 5, and up 10, so that's a positive 10. So I always write down what the formula is, so that once it's on paper, it's easy to fill the numbers in. So the first thing I do is I take the x's, these two, negative 10 and 5, add those up and divide by 2. And then I'll take the y's, which are negative 5 and 10, add those up, and divide by 2. So I get a negative 5 halves, and then a positive 5 halves. So the midpoint would be going over a negative 2.5. Let's see if I can get the pen back again. So negative 2.5, and then up 2.5. So that would be the coordinate here of the midpoint between their houses. Here's another example. So this segment AB has these endpoints, negative 8, 5, and 3, negative 6, and I want to find that midpoint. So to find that midpoint, I add up my x values. One of them is a negative 8, and the other is 3. Doesn't matter what order I put them in. So negative 8 plus 3 or 3 plus negative 8, doesn't matter. Divide by 2. And then I take my y values, 5 and a negative 6. Add those together and divide by 2. And that's how you get the answer of negative 2.5, because that's what that is, and a negative 0.5, because that's what that is. So pretty easy to follow the formula for a midpoint. Now here, in the next slide, is a variation of this. Now think through this very carefully, and you'll see that it's not really too bad to do. Some students have a difficult time with this, but just look over this slide many times and try to follow what is said on the slide. It says one endpoint of a segment is at negative 2, 4. So I know that's an endpoint. The midpoint of that segment is at 2, negative 1. So if that's the midpoint, I have a segment that goes here through that midpoint and beyond. What I want to find out is, right here, what is that other endpoint of that segment? So I say, okay, this is a midpoint problem, so I'll write the midpoint formula. And now I'll put in what I know. I don't know what this value here is, but I will call it x and y. Okay, so now the midpoint right here, I know that. It's a 2, -1. My x values are a -2 and x. So I added those up as x plus a -2 divided by 2. My y values, here's a 4 and here's a y. So when I add those up, y plus 4, and then I put that over 2. Now look how I made the x's in red and the y's in blue. I did that to show you that if these two numbers, x and y, have to equal these two numbers, because these are going to be two numbers over here, then the first value here has to equal the first value here, and the second value here has to equal the second value here. So the red has to equal the red, and the blue has to equal the blue. So that's what I put down. And now I'm going to cross multiply, put that over 1. So this would be x plus a -2. 2 times 2 would be equal to a 4. And then here, put this over 1, cross multiply, y plus 4 has to equal these two multiplied, a -2. And now I have two little equations to solve. So when I solve the red one, I have to add 2 to both sides. When I add 2, I get x is equal to a 6. And here I have to subtract 4 from both sides. And here I get y is equal to a -6. So therefore, this point is 6, -6. So it's a pretty simple process if you understand what you're doing. So if I say, write the midpoint formula, put in the stuff you know, so I put in the midpoint, and I put in the x values that I do know, and the y values that I do know, and then set the first of the xy coordinates here, so that x equal to what this x is going to be, and then set the y values equal to each other. So look that over, see if you can do that problem on your own. So just look at the problem again, take out a piece of paper and see if you can do it without looking at the notes. And when you are able to do that, you'll be able to do the homework assigned and the quizzes and the tests. Thank you.